Ladies and gentlemen, let's move on to, unfortunately, already the last speaker, who is Federico Zamberlan. If I pronounce correctly, Federico joined us as a lecturer only last year. So you traveled from Argentina to the Netherlands during Corona, which is quite an endeavor, I would assume. So that already shows that you are educated in Argentina. You hold a PhD in physics from the University of Buenos Aires. You call yourself an integrative neuroscientist, if I am informed correctly.
It's a way to say it, yeah.
Yeah, okay, thank you very much. And so basically you study, or you were working at in this domain that we call biophysics, which is a domain with a long history already. And so you have been working on applications of machine learning techniques and convolutionary neural networks to study the subjective experiences that originate from the use of psychiatric drugs. So that is really a very hot topic, I would assume. So we are going to listen to your story, but I also would like to share with the audience that you seem to be a person who likes to travel in nature as a backpacker, Latin America. So I assume you have a lot of experiences. And
yeah, actually, that's how my interest in psychedelics started in the beginning. There are a lot of different cultures all around Latin America in which these substances or plants that they have in their environment plays a very important role in their lives from a religious point of view, or even from like a medical point of view sometimes.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's how
it's very interesting to learn from you that you took your inspiration from, let's say, you wandering around the world. So that's great. Give us your story, Federico,
Thank you,
please.
Okay. First of all, I want to thank Marie and Mariam from the invitation, and actually all the team. Well, I just recently joined here Tilburg, and I'm finishing my PhD in physics at the Computational and Cognitive Neuroscience Lab in the University of Buenos Aires, directed by Dr. Enzo Davies. Well, today I'm gonna talk a little bit about how we use psychedelics to explore experiences that will be otherwise impossible to know how it feels like. So we are a research group dedicated mainly to the study of consciousness. Consciousness is this amazing property of being aware of our own existence, having our own point of view and our private thoughts, and the capacity to report or express what we are feeling to others if we wish. And we like to summarize all that is just saying what it feels like to be a brain. We think in culture as a form of manifestations of all consciousness in a collective way. Culture modifies and in turn is modified by the consciousness that integrates it. And in the same way, culture, it's an emergent property of the interactions between all these consciousnesses, achieving in the process something that we could say it's something greater than its parts could have done separately. We can think in consciousness as the result, the emergent property, let's say, of a long chain of events. Our research seeks to trace the origin of consciousness down to the smallest scale possible. We want to explain the sequence of events that are triggered from the moment the neurotransmitter or a drug binds to a protein receptor over the surface or the membrane of the neuron, to how the resulting change in the firing rate of that neuron affects the network to which it belonged and the relationship we could perceive from the subjective experience that is generated. As you probably already imagine, psychedelics are a super powerful tool for reaching that super small scale in consciousness. What are psychedelics? Well, here we see a very simplified but a very illustrative version of how people, or let's say how in psychiatry, they are classificating different kinds of drugs. Many of us are probably familiar with the terms stimulants, for example, or depressants. What they do is quite clear, I guess. They increase or decrease our general activity. It could like exacerbate or calm our current state of mind. But if we want to change that mental state for a different one, then that's when neuroleptics and hallucinations appears. I really like to do this comparison. We could think that this is just buttons on a remote control, and stimulants of depressants could be equivalent to raising or lower the volume, and neuroleptics and hallucinations are there just for changing channels. While in the case of neuroleptics, the goal is always to return the patient to a specific state that we consider normal or healthy. With psychedelics, it's actually quite the opposite. Different psychedelics with diverse neurochemical properties will produce, and actually they produce, different characteristics, like their own specific experience for each one of those molecules, which it's super interesting from many points of view, from the phenomenology and the variety of different altered states of consciousness that we could reach using this tool. It's important to clarify that classic serotonergic psychedelics, the ones that we are using in our experiments, are not addictive and are not going to be harmful from any way. So what they do, they can distort our perception in many ways, mainly visual. It changes how we perceive time, and it changes how we perceive ourselves. That sometimes is related with ego dissolution. And yeah, in some cases, they could produce very bad experiences too. So the first research I would like to talk to you about today is this one, in which we use reports of people under the effects of different psychedelics to help us to understand how it feels like to be in a very specific, not ordinary at all state of consciousness, experience that is so rare and hard to describe that it's almost impossible to understand for someone who didn't have the opportunity to live something like that. Well, in this case, I'm talking about near-death experiences. All the reports are, yeah, pretty similar. There's this light at the end of the tunnel. There was this clear direction in which I have to advance. No one seems to feel fear. Actually, it's something very peaceful from what I hear. And there's this thing that repeats constantly, that they can see their entire life just as a movie before their eyes. Sometimes they could see themselves from outside the body. And something incredible is that all the reports agree on the same, regardless of the person's religious or cultural background. So it could be possible that there is a biological explanation behind this. And actually, that's what we were trying to figure out. To answer these questions, I want to compare different subjective reports from a lot of psychiatric psychedelics drugs. And we work in collaboration with Dr. Bruce Grayson from the University of Virginia. He had a collection of more than 2,000 reports he was collecting during his entire career, and he shared it with us. After the usual pre-processing, in which we take some precautions like avoiding reports in which people were mixing substances to avoid effects overlapping, and things like that, we end up with 175 different psychoactive substances to compare against the near these experiences reports. Here we have like the most typical list we were expecting. We have MDMA, cocaine, DMT, that's the active compound in ayahuasca. Maybe we're going to talk a little bit about that in a second. And very boring things like, I don't know, catnip, yerba mate, that's a hot beverage from Latin America, coffee, alcohol, different drugs were there. Well, the next step, this is like the boring part. We, we need to featureize those text documents to represent them in a quantifiable way. So there was a way to compare them and calculate their similarity. Okay, we achieved this using latent semantic analysis. That's a natural language processing tool in which all documents are first represented as that matrix, in which each element corresponds to a count or a frequency of the different words that appears in all our data set. Then we apply our single value decomposition or any other method for diagonalizing a rectangular matrix. The final idea is that we are going to obtain a representation of each document in a latent space. So if documents share several common words and with similar frequency, then we can deduce that their content is very likely to be similar, and they should be pretty close in that latent space that we just created. This allows us, as I was saying, to represent each drug as a vector in the semantic space, and we are able to compare different experiences choosing some kind of metric. In this case, we choose cosine distance, which basically tell us that when two vectors have the opposite directions, which semantically speaking, that also implies that they are talking about opposite things. And when they're pointing in the same direction, the similarity value is closer to 1. So after comparing each and every one of the different drugs with these reports we have from their experiences, we obtained the following ranking. So at the bottom of the ranking, we have things like catnip, yerba mate again, benzodiazepines. So it seems like our study is working because I think that none of those substances is similar to being almost dead, I guess. And if we go now to the top of the ranking, here we have LSD, peyote, that's a cactus that grows in the desert in Mexico, in the north of Mexico and the south of the United States. We have Salvia divinorum, that's a very powerful dissociative that grows also in Mexico in the south of the country. And finally, we have ketamine. And this not only makes sense from the phenomenological point of view, since indeed very powerful anesthetic that will, while your brain is turning off during this experience, it's going to start to replace your thoughts with hallucinations. So that sounds pretty similar to dying, I guess. But it also makes sense from a biological point of view. Let me explain you this just a little bit, and that's the last thing. It is known that after a stroke, the patient can have serious irreparable consequences. And it's generally thought that this damage is caused by the lack of oxygen during this period, in which many neurons die at some point. But in reality, the lack of oxygen, it's not the main reason behind these consequences. When the brain feels that something terrible is happening, it starts to release a lot of glutamate. It's an excitatory neurotransmitter. This is the way it has to tell us, I don't know what is going on. I don't know what we need to get out of this alive, but here you have all the glutamate you need, just do something. And at some point, the concentration of glutamate in our synapses starts to increase, reaching levels where it starts to be toxic for the neurons and themselves. And this phenomenon is known as excitotoxicity. But if a doctor or nurse were to inject the dose of ketamine at that time, it is known that many of these consequences could be avoided or could be, much less dramatic. Ketamine, that's an MDMA receptor antagonist, competes against glutamate for the same receptors, and in the process is protecting our neuron from excitotoxicity. So let me ask you this. Will it make sense to think that perhaps there is an endogenous molecule with neuroprotective functions that is being released at the same time to compensate for the damage caused by glutamate? I mean, could what we know as a near-death experience be some kind of hallucination resulting from an endogenous psychedelic that we have? Well, there is evidence already suggesting this, and they already found exactly this molecule in many mammals, but we can't find that in humans. We have to take samples of people who is dying in front of us, so that is not going to happen. But it seems like this near-death experience is just an hallucination caused by endogenous molecules. Okay, if you like this work, then I will invite you to read these other publications we have about the same subject. In the first link, you will find our original analysis of the Arrowhead database that is in which this last paper is based. And in the second link, we analyze the correlation between these subjective reports with the molecular structures of those drugs and the neurochemical properties that we know. And finally, I know that I don't have time, but I didn't want to miss the opportunity to briefly tell you about the result of our study on the effects of DMT on the human brain and its correlations with the subjective effects reported during the experience. This publication was, groundbreaking work for psychedelic science in Latin America. And we performed the first ever research with psychedelics on human subjects in Argentina, and one of the few that it was done with smoked DMT. So this is going to be maybe for another occasion. Thanks.
Great, thank you very much, Federica. Again, in view of time, there is little time for questions, but I think that one question that could pop up with the audience immediately is the question about how could we apply this type of research? And then maybe the most interesting part is, could we deduce from your work, let's say, a class of psychedelic drugs that have the advantage of lifting your, let's say, mind to a space you would like to be in for some time and yet not have this nearly death?
You just asked me something that in the worst moment of my life related with that. Let me explain you why. There's this company in the United States, it's a startup. They contacted us at some point because they were interested in the work we were doing, and they wanted us to join them. And at some point we didn't agree. And now it seems like that they received some like $11 million investment just for continue doing this kind of analysis we are doing with real subjects and new kind of drugs. And the potential has its endless, mainly for treating obviously psychiatric disease, but there are more other possibilities.
Yeah, you get the point. Interesting. Are you disappointed about this course of affair?
No, I don't regret. I'm actually surprised that things we are doing could have that commercial potential. I didn't know that. I learned a lot from the experience, and we didn't agree with the company, but it could happen in the future with all in Italy.
And then you would step in.
This time for sure.
I know. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being with us. I think this is the perfect moment in time to hand over to Miriam again to close our TAISIG Talk edition number 11. Please go ahead, Miriam.
Now, our next TAISIG Talks edition will be on the 17th of March forthcoming. Please mark this date in your calendar, since we will be sending around registration links very soon. Have a nice evening for now, and see you soon.